John, good evening once again. Just for those of you viewers who don't know, John and I are not professionals. Well, not professionals in podcasting or video casting. Therefore, this is our second run. So we better be pretty good at it by now, John. We went through an entire segment, John and I, and didn't record. So that's on me because I am the apparently the producer of this show. I'm not getting paid anything, but amateur. So John, good evening. Welcome everybody to the Truth Crusade. This is our reaction video time. I got a couple videos for you, John. I'm gonna play it again. And we'll rehash what we talked about a minute ago, John.
Play it again, Ray.
All righty. So everybody, again, welcome. Please subscribe, click on the notification button, share with your friends, and we love your comments, by the way. So far, they've been great. So much appreciated. Much appreciated. So here we go.
You're going to go like this. You're going to go boop, and you're going to hit the button, and it's going to go, oh, these two wonderful guys are going to show up every week.
The other day, but
there we
went
go.
On Pod Save America, which is his old buddy's podcast, and actually tried to blame what's happening in the Middle East, not on himself, that would be totally appropriate, but on all of us. We're all complicit.
The occupation and what's happening to Palestinians is unbearable. All of us are complicit to some degree. I look at this and I think back, what could I have done during my presidency to move this forward as hard as I tried? I've got the scars to prove it. But there's a part of me that's still saying, well, was there something else I could have done?
What utter and complete bullshit. Was there something else you could have done? Here's an idea. Don't give $100 billion to the monsters who are committing these massacres.
All right, John. So this is kind of good hearing it for a second time, because now I get a chance to really ask you again. Do you buy what Obama is saying? And if not, why? And is Ted Cruz right?
Well, if he gave me $100 billion, I could probably buy it. No.
I don't know if I trust him with $100 billion, John.
I don't trust myself.
Probably go buy a bunch of Converse with him or something. I don't know. Okay, so in all seriousness, is Obama right, or is he full of BS, as Ted Cruz says?
He's full of shit. Here's the fact. I remember, and I'm pretty sure you do too, on the news, all over YouTube and social media, seeing a plane being loaded with dollar bills on its way to Iran, who happens now to be responsible for funding the people that just killed 3 of our soldiers.
Right.
That's the first thing. The second thing is, what do I, or you, or anybody out there in the United States, average everyday people, what do we have to do with what's going on? How is this our fault, and how are we complicit?
Well, he had 8 years to get it right, Joe, right? He had 8 years, right? You and I, we don't have control over where the funds go, but he had 8 years to do something, knowing that we had, during his administration, ISIS became super powerful. The Taliban, Bush took care of some of that, but I'm not a fan of Bush, but Bush took care of some of that, but there was still lingering issues with that in the Middle East. Iran, I'm half Iranian and my family's from, those are terrorist cells that he funded personally with that money you mentioned on the airplane, right? So this is billions of dollars released to them, to these groups, that one replaces the other, right? We've known if it's not Hamas, it's the Taliban. If it's not the Taliban, it was ISIS. You had all these groups, whether it was guys like Arafat and different ones. It was always been somebody in the Middle East, right? But Obama had 8 years, and he personally oversaw, and so did the Secretary of Defense, right? They coordinated this negotiation, so to speak, this nuclear arms deal with Iran, and which was BS, because it wasn't even an arms deal. It was like, hey, I won't do it. I won't make nuclear arms. Okay, we believe you. And all that money released to the Iranians to fund all those terrorist groups. So what do you think about that? And is Ted Cruz right?
Well, Ted Cruz is definitely right. Obama had 8 years, like you said, to get this right, to do something. Now, I'm not gonna put on any one person's shoulders peace in the Middle East. I mean, that's too much for anybody. But he made it worse. Think about this. I was talking about this with some of the people at work today. We were talking about taxes and things like this because tax time is coming up. And part of the reason why we're taxed so much is because we're giving money to all these countries, some of which hate us, including North Korea and Iran. We gave money to Iran. So, we're getting taxed depending upon who you are, 35 to 50% of everything you make, so that we can give it to people who are going to blow us up.
Right, and not taking care of our own here at home. Yeah, and I went to school there, John. I went to school in Shiraz, Iran. And the kids are
I can't even
indoctrinated there.
imagine that.
I mean, I was indoctrinated. Well, the attempt was made. I was not allowed to pray to Christian God, right? It was Islam or nothing, and that's how they're indoctrinated to hate each other or hate America and Americans from a very early age. So it's no, and on top of that, they hate us, and then we give them money to do things because they hate us, and we know that the UN was also funneling money, by the way, to these terrorist groups through the UN, and Trump stopped that. So when Obama says, "Oh, I couldn't do anything," yeah, in fact, you were the one that allowed funding, not just through that deal where Iran got millions on the truck on the loads of money on the airplanes, but he was also funding the UN. U.S. was paying a major amount more than all other countries to the UN, and tons of that money was being funneled at that time to Taliban and other groups post 9/11. So, I mean, he's complicit as hell.
Listen, the UN is a joke. The idea was great. The idea of the League of Nations, and then ultimately which became the United Nations, it's a good idea. But the problem is the United States basically is the United Nations. At least we're the bank. We pay almost the entire bill for almost anything that goes on with the United Nations, and the power and influence we have is going down. So how is that worth it? And like you said,
I would ask Obama, what do we get for our money, right? Again, Trump stopped that money funneling through the UN. Said, hey, every other country, you pay your fair share. Obama was all about fair share. It wasn't even close. The U.S. was paying by far more than its fair share. But again, he was going back to Palestine, though, right? Again, you have obviously major issue there. The Palestinians hate the Israelis, and the Israelis hate the Palestinians. The kids are, as I mentioned before, they grow up like in Iran. They grow up to hate each other. So it's like diplomacy should prevail, but you have money going, and we don't even know where half the money that we as taxpayers, these presidents and Senate send out to other countries. And now it's Ukraine, of course. We don't know where this money goes to, but it usually goes to funding terrorism at some point.
So I'm going to read something. All right, I'm going to read something from the Bible, and we're going to kind of like we're gonna send this off in a direction that I don't think either one of us was expecting. But this is Matthew chapter 24, which talks a lot about the end times. Now, I'm not saying Jesus is coming tomorrow, but we can definitely see by the things that are happening that things are speeding towards the end. So here in verse 16,
prophecy is a powerful thing, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And ready? It says, then let them which be in Judea, Israel, flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of the house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days, but pray that your flight be not in winter, neither on the Sabbath. For then shall be a great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Okay, so what's happening here is that there is an attack that's going to happen on Israel. And it's going to be so bad that Jesus is saying, just grab your shit and take off. Because if you even, take time to say your goodbyes or to pack things up, you might be in trouble. And Russia has been threatening of the United States and NATO. And guess who they're partners with? Your good old buddies over there in Iran. And
it hurts to hear that. I mean, I'm half Iranian, John. It hurts to hear that, but the truth and reality, it's undeniable.
And so what we see is a guy like Obama saying, Palestine, 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 how terrible Israel is. Now, you and I both know that Israel isn't perfect, and they've done a lot.
And there are really good Palestinians, they're good Israelis, but we also know that there's bad intentions, right? So,
and here's the thing. So, just as a side note, real quick, I think both of us know, and I'm sure most people out there who are rational know that it's never ever the citizens. Terrible places like Cuba, Palestine, the Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union was a thing, even Nazi Germany, it was always the government. The citizens in places like Iran, hell, even in North Korea and China, the citizens, the everyday people are just people like you and me.
Yeah. No, in Nazi Germany, in the 30s, before and after Hitler took power, people put signs on their door, pledging allegiance basically to to the Nazi regime, even though they didn't support it, but they were keeping themselves and their families out of harm's way. We know this to be true.
Yeah,
It holds true for a lot of societies.
And so it's always the governments, right? There's the reason why I brought up this particular passage is because you see in Obama's little speech there how the sympathy is all for Palestine. Have you seen all over this country and all over the world really, a lot of protests in all these different colleges and all of these different countries and cities where Jews are being harmed or threatened with harm. For what? And guys like Obama, who have power and influence, making speeches, blaming Israel. And in this case, he didn't outright blame Israel, but he's saying what happened to Palestine is terrible. Well, everybody knows why it's terrible. It's because Israel is bombing them. And Israel's like, but why? Why? And I've said this before. I've said this before. If you have 5 kids and I kidnap all 5 and only give you back 2, you're not going to stop beating my ass, right? Until you get it. Well, sorry.
Yeah, and to kind of put closure to this, because I have another reaction video for you.
No, great.
To put closure to this, we know that this is going to go on for some time because Netanyahu knows, and I'm sure he knows prophecy as well. If Israeli does not stand up, even in the face of, yes, there are Palestinians dying, there's no doubt, and I hate to see citizens die because governments, like you said, put them in harm's way. Reality is there are hostages that are still have not been released. Palestinians have control of that. They could end this conflict right now if they wanted to, but
just by giving back the hostages.
Right, that's all you got to do. I guarantee you, I can't guarantee that, but it certainly seems reasonable that once you give all the hostages back, then diplomacy can take over and the violence can end. But that's my take on that. I have something else for you, John, and give you a little prep work for it.
All right.
I don't know if you know His name is Pierre Poilievre. He is
Yeah.
the Canadian Parliament. He is basically the resistance to Trudeau. Okay.
Oh, good. I like him already.
He is the Ted Cruz. He is the Ben Shapiro. He is all those things that Trudeau can't handle, all in one.
Dude,
And
Ben
so
Shapiro put out a hip hop album with Tom McDonald, by the way.
yes, and we may go over that one next show, people. By the way, so but let me play this clip for you. This is in Canadian Parliament. This is Bouvier, and one of the Liberal Party leaders, Chrystia Freeland, talking about this is again this is a topic of the government there is frivolous spending, just like in the U.S. No accountability, and this guy's awesome. This guy is going to be the next prime minister of Canada if conservatives get a little bit of a foothold there. And I think with all the violations of civil rights that happened with the truckers during COVID, that Trudeau shut down and took all their bank accounts and froze them, basically violating their civil rights, because they didn't want to have to pay all these taxes that Trudeau wanted just to drive trucks. But I guarantee you, Pierre Pouvet, I can't pronounce his name correctly, but Pouliver, I believe it is. He is going to be the next. Thank goodness, really good chance to be the next prime minister of Canada, and Trudeau get his butt out of there. So I'm going to play a clip for you.
Real quick
Yeah.
before you play that,
Yeah.
right? There might be people out there who would be wondering why you would say thank goodness for a guy like that coming into another country that's not ours. I know why, but people might go, well, why do you care about who's the prime minister of Canada?
Well, a lot of policy here, and a lot of obviously there's a lot of sympathy for Canada being as they're our neighbors to the north, and we share a lot of economic and social policy, and a lot of times what happens in the U.S. happens in Canada. The great thing is that what should be happening obviously is rule for the people by the people, and Trudeau has been like Gavin Newsom and like Biden in that he passes executive orders and rules as a totalitarianist, when he's supposed to be elected as a free leader. So that's the issue, is he's leading by by fists and by force and by shutting down free speech, and Pierre Pouliver wants nothing to do with that. He's fighting back and he's gaining a lot of ground, gaining a lot of momentum. So here you go.
Right. When the prime minister doubled the debt, drove inflation and interest rates to their highest levels in a generation, he said he had no choice. Every penny he spent was necessary. Along comes ArriveCan, a $54 million app we didn't need, didn't work, and could have been done for $200,000 or $300,000. Now we learn, based on the ombudsman's audit, that 76% of the contractors did absolutely no work for the money they received. Will the prime minister get taxpayers back this stolen money and stop the waste that is not worth the cost?
So I have an entire video that goes.
So I've done a guy, I've been watching his video. He's in Canada. He's called Moosehead or something. He's this Canadian.
Moosehead.
Yeah,
it's a good beer.
Yeah. But I'll continue playing in a minute, but just give you a little heads up. So basically he's calling out, and just like the US, right? All this money being spent on different programs, different things that nobody knows where the money's going to. So a lot of similarities and mirroring of what happens, what's been happening here is our tax dollars, their tax dollars going towards government programs that don't work, and then no money going towards people that need it, veterans, different things like that. And their inflation is higher than ours actually now, and they're in debt well, based on GDP, they're in debt more than we are, and so he's calling it out. He's basically trying to right the wrong. He's doing what Trump has been trying to do or try to do. So I'll continue the video and we'll go from there.
Wafer.
We'll cut this out, John. Don't worry. This is the Wayfair commercial.
All of us on cable.
We'll cut this out. Don't worry.
Canadians have learned through bitter experience that when conservatives talk about
This is the Deputy Prime Minister of Finance working for Trudeau, by the way, John.
Okay,
public finances, what they're really talking about is cutting the government support Canadians depend on. What they are talking about is cutting early learning and childcare, which is supporting labor participation at record levels in Canada. And by the way, making life more affordable for Canadian families. They want to cut dental care, Mr. Speaker.
What does that have to do?
I'm gonna force a little bit.
Cost after
His
8
response.
years of this prime minister. Speaking of wasteful, this prime minister loves to lecture Canadians on how they use energy. He says that he's just like every other Canadian when he stays with a friend at an $89,000 a week vacation. The average Canadian emits 15 tons of carbon per year. His trip emitted 100 tons of carbon in 1 week. Did he pay the full carbon tax on each ton he emitted for his luxurious vacation?
all right, so.
So
Before we even get
No,
started,
again, and I know it's Canada, but I wanted you to see that this dude pulls no punches, and he is awesome.
did he, what, did he just say there was an emissions tax? Is that a carbon emissions tax?
Trudeau likes to charge people for everything, right? So when Trudeau's talking about emissions tax, emission taxes on cars, but he's proposed all kinds of regulations where if you go over a certain amount in your car, you pay extra taxes because they're tax happy, right, in Canada. And Trudeau is a big time liberal. He's as bad or worse than Gavin Newsom is in California. And they're best buddies, by the way. Pierre is pointing out that he goes on his private airplanes and everything else and uses way more, uses his facts against him. His carbon footprint is 10 times the amount of an average person uses, right? So he's using that climate terminology against Trudeau because it's super easy, right? He's also pointing out that Trudeau goes on $89,000 vacations for a week vacation when he's ripping off the Canadians and taxing them for everything, but he's using their money, their tax dollars, to go on extravagant vacations with his family. Still much the same as like Nancy Pelosi and all of them do here. He's calling that out, and that's what I wanted you to comment on: is the spending and the fact that we have no accountability. And I think you're gonna like this dude. By the way, the podcast I got this from is actually called Moose on the Loose. So there you go.
I love it already.
A little
Moose
shout
on
out
the loose.
shout out to him. He's in Canada, by the way.
So, okay, here's the thing. Whether it's the United States, whether it's Canada or Mexico or China or France or wherever the hell you are in the world, where do you think that these guys are getting the money to go on these vacations? From you. From you. Government, just by very definition, doesn't make money. They're not a business. So anything that they spend on any program or any conference or any vacation that these guys take, it's your money. So it doesn't matter where you're listening. It doesn't matter if you're here in the United States or if you're in another country. Government isn't a business. And so therefore it doesn't produce money. The money it gets is from you. Now, whether it's taxes or if you live in a country where they basically kick down your door and take your money, it doesn't matter. It's all your money. And so when this guy says, hey, I'm going on vacation, and he's spending $89,000 a week, is according to this guy Pierre, I would be pretty damn pissed off. And I think the average everyday person, and again, whatever country you're in, they don't stop and think about this. Mainly because most everyday people are too worried about putting food on the table and supporting their families. I would say that the reason why more people don't pay attention to what's going on around them and spend more time doing their research and listening to what these people are saying is because of that. Not because they're ignorant or not because they're willfully ignorant, because it's because they're too busy trying to like live their lives and survive.
I mean, imagine, I mean, $89,000 a week, right? And the reason I think it's so important, Pierre points out that, but obviously we know this happens in the US. We know these senators and congressmen for their special interest groups and whatever else they're doing, they go on plenty of vacations and they just use your tax dollars and my tax dollars to pay for it. And no different in Canada. The great thing is that thank God it's still somewhat of a democracy or a republic, really, in that there is somewhat freedom of speech there, but it's limited more than here. But the Canadian people don't have much of a voice unless the counterparties in there speak up. But this is their tax dollars, so they're getting taxed. I don't know if you know this, but Canadians get taxed a whole lot more than we do to begin with. They're taxed at they're almost, I think, almost double. Now they get supposed free medical care, which is a joke, but they're paying a lot more taxes than we pay here. And then knowing that your prime minister is supposed to be there to take care of you is using your money to go on frivolous vacations and bill it to you. I mean,
So
insult, right?
here in the United States, when this country was first founded, it first became a country, that these guys didn't get paid, and the representatives, from the House of Representatives, were actually chosen by the people.
Yeah, at that time, lawyers got more money than these politicians ever did.
Yeah, and they didn't stay in Washington or New York or Philadelphia, depending upon what the capital was at the time.
I.e.
They didn't stay
career
there.
politicians, right?
No, they had businesses or other forms of income, and they showed up once every few months
Yeah. In some cases,
to
family
discuss.
farms. In some cases, they ran family farms.
Yeah, yeah. And here's the other thing that people maybe don't realize is that the Senate wasn't even elected. The Senate was appointed by the state. And by the state, I don't mean the federal government. I mean the state, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, whatever. And as a representative, think about this. The representative literally was there to represent the interest of the people. So there should be no, and well, I stand for this and I stand for that, because what you stand for doesn't matter. You're not representing yourself, you're representing the people of the area that you represent.
And when are people going to wake up and push back against this, whether it's United States, Canada, other countries, right? If we allow ourselves to be pushed around, like, oh, this trucker convoy that's going to South Texas and the border, right? They're already being bullied, and people are thinking this is another January 6th setup, right? Or yeah, January 6th
Well,
setup.
some of them woke up, and from the hotel rooms that they were staying at, and went out to their cars to find that their tires were slashed.
Yeah, so all kinds of sabotage. Whenever government officials are threatened or held accountable, whether it's a subgroup of people that work for them that do this kind of sabotage, either way, these people in politics don't want you and I, the people, to have that kind of power, right? They want to be able to wield the power like Gandalf or somebody else in Lord of the Rings, right? Just a magic wand, and whatever they want to happen happens. But it's the problem is people's liberties are being sort of trimmed down over time, and if we don't stand up, if we don't stand up to this, then it's going to continue. And do we want our kids and our grandkids to deal with basically having no money for their own retirement, even more money being wasted because the government's even more out of control. You know, when they're our age, right? What do we
I'm
do
gonna,
about it? What do we do about it, John? Now to put a stop to it, what do we do?
well, before that, I'm gonna read another passage from the Bible, right? Same chapter, talking about the end. It says, because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. What's being said, basically being said, is people are gonna get so pissed off and frustrated with the corruption going on in the world that they just stop caring. And so I propose that this is on purpose. You know, the government or governments is creating this divide. We mentioned in our podcast before we started doing these YouTube videos how many more times the term race or racism appeared in the media over the last few years. Almost 100 times more. And so the problem seems to be that government and the powers that be are pitting people against each other. These people don't like you. Well, then I don't like them.
Yeah.
Well, do you see what they said? See, so they're causing a divide.
Well, and I think if Obama is complicit of anything,
It's that
I told you when he
long
took
ago.
office, right? We talked about this, that the
Yeah.
ultimate goal of people who want bigger government is to divide people, right? Put them into groups. It's in Chomsky's book with the Weather Underground. If anybody wants to read
Yep.
that, right, you will see that. He lays it out clearly as to how to divide and conquer people, right? The way you do it is you divide them up into groups, each group pitted against
Yep.
the other, right? And we saw this in COVID, right? We saw
Yes.
it kind of a testing of the waters of how much frivolous spending people would tolerate, how much regulation people would tolerate, how much how much liberties people would have taken away before they revolted, right? What would
What
it take?
about the division that was
Right.
caused?
And the next
Vaxxers versus unvaxxers.
yeah, the division of, again, multiple groups against each other, because the way you're able to move the needle is to say, oh, for the greater good, right? We're all in this together. All
Yes.
that nonsense spewed by particular part of the media, a particular group, that somehow, because I don't want a jab, which is a shot, not a vaccine, supposedly I'm a bad person and I'm an anti-vaxxer, right? I've gotten vaccines my whole life, but all of a sudden, because I didn't want this, now all of a sudden,
Yes.
right? And again, like you said, division, right? So I kind of think, kind of for us to leave with that at the end of the show here, because I think the next show, maybe you can find some videos that will kind of prove our point, whether it's old COVID videos, whether it's videos about division or whatever you can find. I think the audience would be well served for us to go into the next level with this for a moment and look at the divisions. Sounds like your doggy's there. The divisions that have been created over the past few years, whether it's COVID, whether it's government, whether it's media, who've divided the country. I think it's worth talking about. So I'll leave it at that. I mean, I know you and I want to keep these segments short because our attention spans aren't all what they used to be. But I mean, I think I don't know if you agree, but I think that we could probably expand on it a little bit and even go back in time a little bit and look at 2020, 21 on some of the videos there or some of the audio clips, and maybe gain some perspective as to where we are now and what kind of divisiveness was created at that time too.
So let me leave with this to answer the original question: is what do we do? We see each other the way God sees us. People that He loves, people that He died for.
Well, not everybody has God and Christianity to fall back onto, John. And I know that you and I talk about, but falling back onto that. We have that, I'm not afraid to die attitude because I know what's coming, what's for me, right, in the kingdom of God. But other people who don't have the faith, who are listening to the show, what's your advice to them, whether you're Christian or not, to deal with all this divisiveness, all this that's going on? How do you manage it? Let's say you didn't have God in your life yet. How would you manage your day to day? Like, what would your advice be to them just to get through the day? Family,
Well,
friends, what would you do?
well, the the first thing we need to do is to take a look, and I'll illustrate it with this. This is a story I've told you about.
We
I
got
used to
about
work.
3 minutes, John, by the way, in the segment left, just want you to know.
All right, so I'll make this quick. I used to work with a gentleman at work, from inner city Chicago, 6 foot, like 8, African American guy. We had nothing in common, but we got along great. We used to argue and stay after work for like 2 hours talking about politics and life and things like this. And one day it dawned on me that part of the problem was I grew up in a certain town with a certain view. My town was about 92% white at the time. Right? He grew up in inner city Chicago. And the problem is with the world that I grew up in a certain way. So I assume the rest of the world is the same way. He grew up in a certain way. He assumes that the rest of the world is how he grew up. You grew up on the West Coast and spent a lot of time in Iran. Right? You grew up, and until you got older, assumed that how it was in your particular experience in life was the way it was around the world. What we need to do is recognize that everybody's life and experience is different, and that how it is where I grew up isn't necessarily how it is everywhere else. What this does is it allows us to be a little bit more understanding, to sit back and consider what the other person is saying, and not let political or religious or social views hinder what we're hearing.
Yeah, and with that being said too, John, got about a minute here. I would say, if you don't have church or religion to fall back onto, first, give it a chance. Maybe go to church for the first time. Have
There
that
you
fellowship,
go.
right? If you're missing that, you're feeling the divisiveness and the politics of it all, and it's stressing you out. That's something that I would recommend. It helped me. It helped, everybody has their outlet. I think churches can be a great thing, even if you're not religious, even if you just go there for the fellowship and the positive attitude of people. And if you get one sentence of a message from there to leave there with, to give yourself something to look forward to that week, that month, whatever it is, do that. Lean on your family, lean on your friends, show love and caring for people. Let that be what dictates your life rather than the negative that is spewed by the media and clickbait and headline clicking, right, for sensationalism to get us all scared. I look forward to talking to you, John, on the next show, because I think we've opened up, I think, a can of whatever that we can talk about, and look forward to it. And I hope everybody joins us. John, I love you. You're my friend. Always been there for
Love
me.
you, bro.
And that's what we got to do is have fellowship and friendship. We'll see you next time on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Also, go 49ers. Have a nice day.